Hello and welcome to another episode of Attacking Third, a CBS Sports soccer podcast. I'm Sandra Herrera, lead NWSL writer for CBS Sports, joined today, as always, by my colleague and co-host, Lisa Roman, NWSL analyst and broadcaster for CBS Sports. Today, we have a bit of breaking news that we need to discuss. U.S. Soccer and the United States women's national team reach agreement over equal pay disputes, and we are going to get into things. Man, we're just celebrating. I feel a lot of historic things here just in this last month, Lisa. It's a lot. How you doing today?
We are celebrating so much. I mean, first it happened at the club level in the NWSL, getting a CBA ratified. Trinity Rodman, right, making history with a $1 million contract as Rookie of the Year from 2021. And now this happening on the international level with the U.S. Soccer Federation. I mean, this is huge news. Heck of a way to start our Tuesday morning, Sandra. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's always a fun opportunity, I think, for us to be able to sit down and sort of talk about breaking news, react to breaking news, and sort of have a place here where we can kind of have everything all encompassed, where folks can point to and say, what happened? Let me just go here real quick. You can, a quick reminder for everyone, you can follow us on Twitter at Attacking Third. You can join us live always whenever we want to do breaking news at YouTube at youtube.com/Attacking Third. But big news and big day. I'm not too sure many folks saw this coming because this settlement has really been years and years in the making. Maybe let's go back to 2016, Lisa. It's been in place since then, really.
It really has. I mean, 6 years these players have been fighting this fight, and 3 years since the case was actually brought into the court in 2019. But that is where it all starts. I mean, even when you look back at today, it is Megan Rapinoe and Alex Morgan really being the face of this change on the player side of things. But way back in 2016, it was a different group of players. Hope Solo, Carli Lloyd, Becky Sauerbrunn leading that fight, along with Megan Rapinoe and Alex Morgan, two players that are one of the final few still playing. And that was ahead of the World Cup. But this fight was originally started in 2016 by these players. That's when they first filed an Equal Employment Opportunity Commission complaint for the United States women's national team over the inequality in pay and treatment between the men's side and the women's side. There's been a lot of ups and downs since 2016 over these last several years. And I think you said it perfectly right, Sandra. It all kind of tied up in a bow very quickly at the end of it. It's almost like, okay, the deadline is coming by the end of March. Let's get this out there and let's make this news possible and happen. And everything really coming to fruition this morning, but it's still not done yet. So let's kind of break it down. Like, what happened today and what still needs to happen for the players?
Yeah, absolutely. So this settlement with U.S. Soccer, it's for a total of $24 million in terms of the pay discrimination lawsuit. So it's almost like sort of broken up into two parts, right? It's a $22 million payout, sort of that's going to eventually be determined by the players how that gets paid out. But U.S. Soccer is also committing to a $2 million fund, which would sort of be something that players can continue to maybe dip into for charitable purposes, right? Players can apply for this up to $50,000. So altogether, summarizing in $24 million. And it's just, sort of seeing these numbers, I think at first glance, you're kind of like, whoa, like, how is that? Like, how did U.S. Soccer agree to this, and or why, or like, how is this? There's always going to be naysayers out there. It's like, where is this money, coming from, et cetera. But that was part of the ongoing back and forth, right, between these two sides. The, U.S. Soccer, talking about, hey, initially in these early stages of these lawsuits, saying that that's not something that we are able to meet you on. That's not that would bankrupt us, right? This is not something that we can maybe sort of come halfway. And then, the women's national team taking a look at their record as a winning team, as going out there constantly raising the bar, but not only that, equating that to that success on the pitch to actual dollars, right?
Yes.
Within these major tournaments in which they're winning and collecting titles and gold medals, etc. It felt historic just sort of reading those numbers, and the fact that within these numbers, right, these $1 million numbers, that yes, the settlement is contingent on a ratification of a CBA, eventually. But I don't think an agreement like this comes to life without those conversations already happening and then good faith negotiations, going on right now at this moment.
I think that's exactly right. This is almost like the door has been unlocked and now the players get to walk through the door and have those conversations about a CBA, because that wasn't possible before with this lawsuit going on. And that was really the biggest obstacle standing in the players' way from negotiating a CBA with the U.S. Soccer Federation. You mentioned the $24 million payout from U.S. Soccer Federation. Initially, the players asked for $66 million, which is, I mean, $24 million is a huge payout, and 22 going to the players. But originally they asked for 66 million, which seems like a bit of a discrepancy, but that's what all these negotiations were about. That's what the last 3 years in and out of meetings, that's what they were talking about, what each side was willing to compromise and negotiate on in order to come to an agreement. And Alex Morgan actually talked about that, about how they asked for 66 million, but then they decided on the 24 million amount. And Morgan said that she got full payback on everything non-World Cup bonuses, which is really huge for those players. Despite winning a handful of World Cups and being a very successful team over the last few years, it really came down to looking forward. And these players, specifically Alex Morgan, even Megan Rapinoe, they maybe could have continued this fight a little bit longer and asked for more money based on their success they had in the past. But these players decided to stand together and look towards the future of soccer for women in the United States and playing in the U.S. Soccer Federation. And they chose that this was something they were willing to compromise on, all of their past success and what they should be paid for, in order to agree on equal pay moving forward for the future of the sport, which I think is a huge point to kind of make, that these players could have continued to fight and there wouldn't have been a settlement today if they were nitpicking and trying to get everything that they deserved over the last few years. But instead they laid down their armor and decided that they were going to really pay it forward to the future generations, which is something that Megan Rapinoe and Alex Morgan talked about when they went on Good Morning America this morning on Tuesday morning when the news broke. They said that this is for the future. This is for future generations. And really it starts now. Now they are on equal playing field with the men's side and they can move forward, which is huge to just think about how selfless these players were to go through all this fight and just to say we're doing it for the future. That's crazy.
Well, it's like dangerous almost, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about when we're looking at sort of the timeline of things and how things sort of flowed out, even going all the way back to 2016 and then pushing forward into 2019, just the concept, right? To sort of wrap your head around that a women's national team is in an open lawsuit with their employers while they're going out there in a World Cup and doing what they did and just sort of really taking that international stage by storm, going all the way to lift the World Cup in the end during 2019. And we heard coming out of those celebrations, right, and celebrating that 2019 World Cup at the time with U.S. Soccer President Carlos Cordero about, hey, like maybe this is going to be that jump off point with all this constant back and forth to finally get into these rooms and hash something out. But it just didn't necessarily pan out that way, which maybe brings in, current President Cindy Parlo Cohen into the spotlight a little bit with this, right? Because there was an attempt to try to hear from players, judges who ruled in favor of U.S. soccer versus the players, right? Setbacks that had to take place. And we heard from players, and their representation and lawyers that it was a difficult process, that there were moments of the two sides just not getting together and not even coming into meetings to sort of try to hash things out. For Cindy Parlo Cohen, current U.S. Soccer Federation president, but also a player herself once upon a time. We're talking about an era in which maybe something like this settlement today possibly wasn't even, couldn't even been dreamt of, right? In terms of the generation of players that she's coming from. But this is like we're sort of seeing the breaking news that came out on it, the joint statement, right, that was released, in line with both U.S. Soccer and the United States Women's National Team Players Association. They're celebrating it. This is being touted as a victory for people on both sides of the spectrum here, and to sort of have, yes, an Alex Morgan, a Megan Rapinoe doing these crazy early AM hits, right, on all kinds of morning shows. It's not surprising to hear somebody like Megan Rapinoe, like you mentioned, say that this is actually wasn't just a fight for us, but it was for the next generation. It's very, it almost sort of feels a little bit full circle to sort of see somebody like an Alex Morgan or somebody like a Megan Rapinoe, or even, a Kristen Press or Jessica McDonald, who were big parts, and figures in these moments and in these negotiations, where they were part of that generation at one point where they heard a lot about, hey, we're fighting this fight so that you don't have to fight this fight. And then we're seeing, again, these players, Morgan, Pino, Press, that they're now in those positions too, of like, hey, we also have this opportunity to do this, and we want to make sure that no one else has to have a similar fight. So I think maybe, yes, the numbers can maybe be something that people get fixated on. But I think the concept of like reaching a settlement for a large lump sum, right, adjacent to what they ultimately were fighting for, equal pay, moving forward, that is going to be something that is in place now.
Yes, it's truly the mantra of leave the game better than you found it. And that's what these players are doing. After this news broke on Twitter and social media, former players like Heather O'Reilly just putting out their sentiments of how happy and proud they are of how far this has come. Sandra, you mentioned U.S. Soccer Federation President Cindy Parlo, Cohen, and how the relationship between the players and the federation hasn't been that great. And this is really a turning point for that, to kind of start to mend those relationships and hopefully get on really good terms. Because if your employer and your employees are on the same page, they respect each other and they agree with each other, it makes for a better situation, hands down. And that's the direction that these players are heading in. But to have the equal pay, so huge. I mean, it's going forward now for anything that the teams are involved in, whether it's friendlies, whether it's tournaments, even the World Cup. It's that to have that basis is just fantastic. And so, I mean, that's the next step, right? To have equal pay between the men's and the women's side moving forward. And now that this settlement has been approved between the two sides, now a new CBA gets to be the discussion and the central focus point for these two sides. And once that happens, then there's final approval through the courts, and then this settlement payout happens. So this is really the first step that the players don't get to reap the benefits of until that CBA is approved. But I mean, this is a huge step in the right directions and a celebration that these players should be celebrating. And then it's almost like, okay, let's work on the CBA because the fight is not done.
The work is never done. It feels like it. But I think that's sort of the ethic, right? That sort of has been the foundation for the breakthrough of something like this news today. And of course, we had to hop on here and celebrate it. It feels like it's been a very big month, right, when it comes to American women's soccer in this country.
We've been busy. We've been
busy. Lisa, we started off this month celebrating the CBA for the NWSL players, right? And then now we're looking at this huge settlement between U.S. Soccer and the United States Women's National Team to sort of close out the month. It's almost like this, it's very refreshing, right? I think from maybe some other things that we were talking about in the prior year. So it's exciting to come on here and chat about it with you. We've got more in the works, though. We are going to have an interview with U.S. Soccer Federation President Cindy Parlo. Cohen, thank you all for joining us in our reactions to the settlement between U.S. Soccer and United States Women's National Team over the equal pay dispute. You can stay right there, and we will be back, and you can watch the interview with Cindy Parlo coming up next.